Hello, everyone. Today I would like to speak about KRIYAS, meditative KRIYAS. And I've already made one video some years ago about KRIYAS, explaining the difference between the actual spiritual awakening and KRIYAS, or the movements, the spontaneous, smooth movements that could be seen as yogic movements, or some kind of different spiritual experience phenomena that may occur, that may happen after the Kundalini awakening or spiritual awakening, real spiritual Kundalini awakening, because it's very important to understand that there are lots of experiences that people may consider as Kundalini spiritual awakening, but unfortunately in their essence they are not. And they are not because they spiritually trigger their subtle being, subtle body. They overstimulate their nervous system, their upper glands, their pineal pituitary glands, and may kind of gain temporary access to maybe a different realm or dimension, or witness some sort of a supernatural phenomena. But these incoherent, inconsistent appearances of certain phenomena or experiences should not be considered for spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening. We're living in the times where everyone experiences certain, you would say, occult afflictions, or karmic afflictions, or even spiritual harassments, which result in, let's say, unknown diseases, syndromes, different types of, sudden loss of mental balance or emotional balance, delusion, hallucinations, and stuff like that, voices hearing and stuff. And of course that our system is not prepared to experience that phenomenon, so we just sweep everything under one and the same rug and label it as a mental sickness. But a lot of these things are a spiritual phenomena of a karmic nature, a karmic payback, or a phenomenon of spiritual sacrifice, the sacrifice that your ancestors, your bloodlines, have been performing for eons, for thousands of years. And so you are just their sacrificial lamb, so to speak. But this is not the point of the video. The point of the video is to raise awareness about actual spiritual spontaneous kriyas and blissful meditative states. Now let's take a look at the actual signs of spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening, that are really, really rare. They might sometimes coincide, or they might sometimes, be similar in appearance, with certain karmic affliction phenomena, or spiritual harassment, so-called phenomena, because it's the phenomena of a subtle nature and thus spiritual. So everything in this world is of a spiritual nature, because it wouldn't be able to have this physical appearance without the spiritual substance. Yet the frequency, that spiritual frequency, substance, is and should be questionable. So it's like when we look at people, we see their physical form, but their essence differs from one to the other. Sometimes certain, let's say, plants and animals can also host certain spirits, or they can become host to something else that we're not aware of. So it's just something to ponder on. Now, when you relax and truly content, and you're falling into natural absorption, you may have sudden sort of involuntary kriyas, spontaneous kriyas. They are the result of the release of trapped energy, or the energy of a different, usually lower frequency, because you have to understand the phenomenon of kriya, or spontaneous yogic postures. Originally, yoga was spontaneous. No one was actually bending and twisting their bodies voluntarily, or it wasn't some sort of a practice or something that you go to or have to force on yourself in the name of losing weight or getting into a better shape, or for spiritual evolution, because none of this really matters from the real higher standpoint. It is basically real yoga, because real yoga is only involuntary and spontaneous, and it occurs, all these yogic techniques and practices and different pieces of knowledge, or in Sanskrit is known as vidya, they occur spontaneously from within. You know them because you sink, so to speak, dive deeper into your own essence, which is of a very, very subtle nature, of a higher frequency nature. And so when you're sinking into the absorbed state, whatever is of a different frequency, of not that of higher blissful frequency, starts being released. And so this release is known as the movement, because it's like when you boil water, gas is released in the form of a bubble. The same happens with kriyas. Kriyas are a phenomenon that movement is the gas. It's the movement, is a vayu movement. When all the, in Taoism it is known, in yoga it is known, it's just that our ignorant spiritual gurus and yoga teachers who have no reference point or direct experience don't know, and so they obviously can't tell this simple fact that it is the release. It is the release of energy, negative, meaning not negative, but it's a lower frequency, trapped on the physical level, trapped gases. In Taoism, it's known as po, spirits of po. In Sanskrit, it's known as vayu prana, or the pranas that are going. So when the person is cultivating subtle frequency of a higher nature, all the lower frequencies get released, and that's why you experience subtle, smooth movements, which are very, very different from spiritual possession, when the person's consciousness is in captivity of another spirit or other consciousness, and so that consciousness is not comfortable in your body, and so, or it has some kind of erratic, disjoint connection, which result in so-called movements of a possessed being. And the movements of the possessed beings, or these possessed so-called movements, which are not kriyas, but people call them as Kundalini kriyas, these are the phenomenon of possession, people singing, being unconscious, because the difference between real kriyas and the kriyas of possession is, or lies in the fact that you are very blissful and aware when you are actually experiencing the kriya of awakening or yogic posture or different phenomena, spiritual phenomena, because your own higher consciousness becomes a protective shield and you're protected from any negative energy. When you're possessed, you're erratic. Your movements are erratic. You're singing. You are unconscious. So this is the biggest thing, unconscious. The biggest sign is to be being unconscious, dancing, rising, moving in a very erratic way. Your body basically like a rolling in a very, very kind of vigorous way. And you have these vigorous movements, very erratic, very disjoint, lacking grace and, subtlety and smoothness. You might start singing, speaking in tongues, hissing, acting like an animal, or you might just literally be like a puppet in the hands of some other, or under the influence of some other consciousness. When people go to different places like temples, ancient places, which usually are possessed with different spirits. So if you're a weak consciousness, unprotected, your space of consciousness is sort of, as a system, energetic system, is open to others in that ignorant, idiotic way, you may very possibly become a victim of such possessions, either temporarily or permanently. If permanently, you will end up in a mental asylum. If temporarily, you'll have this so-called disjoint spiritual temporary experiences which are very unusual, and you might consider them as a sign of divinity, of bhakti, and so on and so forth. Most of spiritual religious institutions are institutions of spiritual possession. That's why you cannot find true spiritual awakening or the truth in these institutions. But they are the reflection of the majority, so to each their own way. Now, so if there are violent movement, unconscious movement, speaking in tongues, hissing, bizarre phenomena of any sort, that will be possession. If you experience deep meditation, blissful release of energy through smooth dance-like movements, swaying in yogic movements, hand gestures, bendings, bowing, you may have also you may hear very gentle cracks and joint corrections. You may perceive blissful, peaceful feeling inside, a feeling of joy, love, devotion. You might sometimes have devotional, subtle tears. You may also burst into tears sometimes. These will be the tears of purification, because your higher frequency of consciousness transmuted the low frequency of energies into spit, saliva, tears, and gentle movements. At the same time, we also can experience, while being possessed, compulsive desire to remove something from our mouth, spit, burp, yawn. When we have this uncontrollable burping, yawnings, pressures in the neck and the head, these are not the signs of spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening. These are the signs of psychic attack, spiritual possession, some form of spiritual oppression, or the presence of negative energy around you or within you. These are the signs of the presence of parasitic energy on the physical, spiritual, emotional, mental levels. And the task is to, first of all, identify the disease. This is so-called a spiritual disease. Spiritual diseases, all of these which I mentioned, these are the signs of spiritual possession, the spiritual depletion, energy loss through either energy vampirism, you either being in touch with some parasitic energy forms, or you've been enslaved in the name of spirituality by these parasitic forms or entities or people, magicians, tantrics, etc., from whom you looked for solutions. And now your energy system is under their control. And so you think you are experiencing kriyas, but in the reality, you are under someone else's influence. Your energy is harnessed. Entity spirits may be sent into your system and body, and you may be literally, spiritually sucked or devoured during these moments of uncontrollable yawning, burping. Sometimes also in the presence of higher beings, that could be a release of negative energy, but it's still the sign that you are under someone's energetic spiritual oppression, under the influence of shadows and negative energy clusters. So be aware of that. And do not fool yourself unnecessarily that you're spiritually awakened or enlightened because you have these phenomena. Spiritually awakened beings do have spiritual experiences, phenomena, but they do not emphasize it or give such an importance because they continue moving on by letting go. If you get stuck somewhere, you cannot move on and proceed or evolve further. So it's very important to remember when you have these different spiritual experiences. Another point is drug-induced experiences, which are created through the stimulation, overstimulation of nervous system through psychedelic drugs or any other form of drugs, which usually lead to hallucinations, hearing voices, experiencing apparitions, hearing suggestions, or having emotional thought suggestions. These are all attachments. Usually people go into these different forms of addiction either because their family has been sacrificed or punished, or they themselves connect to these different subtle realms of low frequency and then become the victims of them. So I posted a lot of videos about psychedelic, the use of psychedelic drugs, any kind of drugs that induce spiritual experiences that get full this generation into belief of being enlightened, spiritually evolved, and spiritually ascending. Definitely all of that has nothing to do with spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening and any form of spiritual evolution in this day and age is still extremely rare phenomenon. And it's, first of all, the expansion and the evolution of intelligence through humility. If this is not there, if this prerequisite is not there, spiritual evolution is but impossible. And any of those disjoint experiences become but one's demise, one's spiritual downfall and a trap. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope it brought clarity. Be blessed, be happy, like, share, and subscribe, and stay wise.